You're listening to Enduring Essentials for Educators, Part 1. This is episode 1 of the Educators for Impact podcast. This episode was recorded on July 12th, 2020. Hello. Welcome to episode 1 of the Educators for Impact podcast. We shine a light on educators as people. Through exploring, examining, and uplifting the experiences of educators, we hope to leave a lasting impact on the students, families, and communities we are called to collaborate with. This is the first episode of our first series titled Enduring Essentials for Educators. During this episode, we will discuss the essentials that allow us, educators, counselors, principals, etc., to be authentic to our beliefs. Allow me to reintroduce myself. My name is Michelle, and I'm a middle school teacher in the Bronx, New York. And joining me today is my co-host, Kalinda Jones, aka Dr. Jones, and she's going to quickly reintroduce herself as well, just in case we have a few new listeners.
Hello, I am a professor at a community college here in Sacramento, California. I teach social work classes, and I have experience as well teaching science classes in the middle and high school level, as well as counseling classes at the graduate school level. So we're going to begin with our quote of the day. This comes from Bell Hooks, and her quote is, "If we give our children sound self-love, they will be able to deal with whatever life puts before them." Now we've changed that up a little bit to focus a little on educators today, so that we're going to use that quote in this way. If we give ourselves sound self-love, we will be able to deal with whatever life puts before us as educators. And we thank Bell Hooks for that. So we're going to move on to the first part here where Michelle is going to tell us about an experience. Can you tell us as an educator how you remain authentic to your beliefs and continue to grow?
Awesome. I definitely can. I just want to make sure that I acknowledge the power of Bell Hooks' words. Mm-hmm. And, when we as educators are sharing quotes with our kids, we usually pick quotes that were powerful and impactful to ourselves. And so we decided to choose this quote just because it's all about self-love, self-care, and you have to bring that type of energy into the classroom. And when you come into a classroom, you're bringing that authenticity and your beliefs into that space as well. So if I'm thinking about how do I remain authentic, I got to think about me. I got to think about who I am and how that shows up in my classroom. So when I'm thinking about, what has stopped me from being my authentic self, right? I'm thinking about fear, right? And I think that, Kay Jones, you could probably agree that as new teachers, especially, we have a fear, right? This fear of, being judged, this fear of not doing something right, this fear of just not really owning up to the expectations of what a teacher should be because we're new to the profession. And so as you're thinking about just a way in which you are authentic, there was probably a point where you weren't so authentic in the classroom. And I just want to name that I think all teachers, we have had this persona that we've put on, and at some point we decide, hopefully, to wake up from that persona. Mm-hmm. And take on, or not really take on, but bring ourselves into the classroom and kind of shed that that layer of things that we believed, a teacher should do. Mm-hmm. And Kate Jones, can you give me an example? What is something that you had to shed, as you were trying to become your authentic self in the classroom? What's something that you were I'm gonna just take this off real quick?
I think one of the things goes back to what we talked about in episode 0, right? Which was, mm-hmm. I didn't realize that I had kind of this emotional wall between myself and students. So I knew that I would go into the classroom and just go in as a cognitive being, just with my head.
Got it.
So that when, unfortunately, when Earl was shot and killed, as we talked about in that previous episode, what happened was my emotions were all over the place. Right. So I could have kept them out before was ridiculous, but that's how I was thinking about it.
Yeah, you were definitely leaving that the heart outside the door, you know? And so you have this awakening, like, you know what, I'm not going to do that anymore. And so when I'm thinking about like things that I never wanted to do in the classroom, I think about what I believe, right? And one of my beliefs is never leave a child behind.
Mm-hmm.
Like during the lesson, after recess, you count those heads and you're like, yo, I got everybody, you know, you're making sure you're not leaving kids behind. And so, you know, that's my core belief. And as a teacher, especially nowadays, you know, the pace of your classroom is a huge part of your evaluation. You know, are you moving quickly? Are you moving efficiently? Are you using time effectively? And with those expectations, my evaluation of it as a teacher has gone down, right? Because I am one who's like, no, if the kids aren't getting it, I'm not moving on, right? And that has gotten me in trouble at times. But the problem with that was, even though it was my belief, I really wasn't getting into communication with the people around me, right? I was standing for that belief, but I wasn't expressing why I believed that. Uh-huh. Nor was I even really being asked why I believed that, right? So when I think about a way to come out of like, you know, still loving yourself, loving your authenticity, loving your core belief, right? Which is a beautiful belief to not leave anyone behind.
And honoring.
However, say it again?
Honoring your core belief as well, is that?
Yeah, like definitely honoring the belief, right? Like I'm gonna honor this, I stand for this. However, when you're standing on something, you have to still share that belief with other people. You can't just stand in silence. And so I was standing with an attitude like, no, I'm not moving forward, instead of like kind of like expressing like, well, this is my belief. And so what happened was, in order for me to grow and continue to become a better teacher, I had to just communicate my why behind my belief. And so that's what I started to do. And I was able to just do a better job of planning those times where I would need extended time, where I knew the kids would struggle, knowing your classroom, knowing your kids. I was able to just talk to my coach, you know, talk to whoever's in my classroom, like, hey, I planned this time in. You can see it in my lesson plans. You can see it in, you know, if you've been here yesterday, come today. You know, we expanded the time because that's what they needed. So a big part of like standing on your beliefs and being authentic to your beliefs is sharing those beliefs, you know, and making sure that the people around you understand where you're coming from and what you're fighting for. So that's a little bit about, you know, an authentic belief that I have. You want to share an authentic belief?
Can I ask you a follow-up?
I don't know. Is it going to be like...
It's not too hard. So
that's what I'm saying. Is it going to be a how or a why question?
How? So can you want a why question? I can come up.
No, I'll take a how. What's up?
So you're talking about how you share that belief with the people who were evaluating you or who were observing your teaching, right? Mm-hmm. I'm wondering about either two things. I'll give you two choices. How did you come to understand that was your belief? Or, so like, how did you become more authentic yourself in that belief? Or how did you communicate that belief to your students?
That's deep. Can I go with the first one?
I gave you two.
Okay. So because...
whichever one you want.
This belief comes from my own experiences as a student, you know, where I felt like I was able to excel in the classes where the teacher allowed me to learn the way I learned best. I'm a process thinker, I always have been, so I need to process it, and then I need to, from that process, create something on top of that. And the teachers that allowed me to take that extra time, you know, and show that gift of creativity, you know, I was able to, you know, just do a much better job in the class. It wasn't that I didn't get it. It's just the fact that I just needed more time. So I'm like, that's like a soft spot for me, right? Where it's something I carried from my own experience into my classroom, you know, and it really matters to me that teachers acknowledge that about me. Never made me feel ashamed of it. And they just allowed me to just move in that way, you know?
So let me bounce off one more thing with that then.
Okay.
Sometimes we talk about, and let me just correct something from episode 0, because in episode 0, you said you had me for 9th grade science, but you didn't. You had me for biology.
No way. That was bio?
Here's how I know, because this has to do with this question, is that when you talk about what you remember from that class, which was, God knows, 20 million years ago, you talk about this creature project that we did in genetics.
Yes, I do.
So it was biology, because I was like,
no. It was because earth science was Balmer and Smith.
There you go.
So it was like, yeah. Okay, you're right.
Okay. So
all right, leave me alone.
I think the reason I'm saying that is because you talk about that creature project to this day.
I sure do.
The creature project is exactly what you're talking about, because in that creature project, I taught y'all Punnett squares. You learned how to do the genetics piece. And then from there, I said, all right, now you're going to, with this information, you're going to create your own creature, and then you're going to show me their Punnett squares, and you're also going to show me their family tree to trace through all those genetic characteristics. So I'm just wondering, this explains exactly what you were talking about what you need as a learner and how that's informed your authentic beliefs in the classroom. But I just want to know if you have anything to say about that creature project.
First of all, my creature project was amazing. The name of my creature was Babalos. All right. And it was so popular that that became my nickname. People started calling me Babalos because like they love my little creature. Now the creature was great. It was raggedy though. It was Babalos by the end of the week was falling apart. But I just remember like the process, right? Like the learning took place first. You always made us like notes, binders. Like we had to like prove that we knew it before we could create anything, right? And so I thought that was really cool. And yeah, I'll never forget Babalos. Like I think I named a cat Babalos at some point. Like my email, my first AOL email was Babalos. Like way back. Yeah.
This has to do with meaning, right? So something about that project was also authentic for your learning, for it to keep that long. And the fact that, like, I don't know, I don't remember what you made Babalos out of, but I do remember the name now that you said it. I didn't. I couldn't have pulled it out of nowhere. But I think that it had to have some personal meaning for you as well. And so there's something about that process of learning, and then that your ability to own and create. For those of you who want to connect it to an academic concept, it's Bloom's taxonomy, actually. You have to know, and then you have to compare and comprehend and do things with it to eventually create something with it, right? So I'm just wondering if you remember what you made Babalos out of.
I do. Pipe cleaners. Styrofoam, like little styrofoam balls that I cut or like made, and I remember painting them. He was green. I remember painting him. I just remember like, and putting him in a shoebox because I wanted him to be protected, but the protection didn't last that long. But yeah, I remember like it was like a reveal, like, you know, showing everybody like, oh snap, you know. So that's a part of
the shoebox lid, and there is your creature.
And there is my creature. But the creature project was like famous at Willow Run. Like everybody knew about your creature project, like because everybody had to take biology. So when my sister was talking about it, you know, or talking to me about it, like she remembers her creature. Like it's like it was a staple like project at the school. So yeah.
So in our last episode, we talked a little bit about this science back room that
a portal.
You called it a portal. I call it a science back room.
Okay.
You mentioned in that episode about the fact that there was a drawer in there that had all kinds of crap in it. And there was a drawer that had all kinds of stuff in it, macaroni and and all kinds of stuff, because if students did not have materials to make the creature, they could go back there, and then all they had to do was put the materials into the Punnett squares, because they got to choose the actual characteristics the actual traits that went in the Punnett squares. I just want to say that, like, that's kind of a thing about adapting to whatever needs the students have. When I saw a barrier, which was like, oh my gosh, I can't enjoy this project because I don't have materials, I was like, well, we'll just collect them. And to tell you the truth, a lot of it was the leftover stuff that other students had brought to do their creatures with in class, and then there was just a place to put it as opposed to throw it away. So I don't know if you want to go any more into this or if we want to transition now, but fun memories of Bubble.
I just want to say, you know, my creature was the best creature that year.
Of course it was.
And, you know, Babalos, you live on forever. 20 years later, you still live in Babalos, for the heart, for the people. So yeah, I think, you know, when you're thinking about your authentic belief, it is tied to an experience a lot of times. It's something that you decide, a belief is something you decide to believe in, right? And it was definitely a decision I made to like bring that into my classroom. So when you're thinking about your belief and your authenticity, like what comes to mind?
Well, I'm going to position the answer to the question in a much different part of my career. So last week, I was able to pay tribute, I hope, to Earl Lemons and to his life. I wish he was still here. At the same time, I honor that impact that he had on me.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope I didn't center myself too much in that, because really, I really want to center him and pay tribute to him.
Mm-hmm.
What I learned from him 4 or 5 years into my teaching career was that I wasn't being authentic. So now I'm going to forward that about 15 years after that into the future. Might be more like 10. I have to actually do the math.
You
And
pick.
I taught K-12 school for 12 years. I taught high school science for 12 years. And then I left to go get a PhD in counseling psychology. And then I did what we all do when we're doing that. We do a dissertation, and then I had a visiting professor 1-year thing in Chicago. And finally I ended up on where I was supposed to go, I thought, which was on the tenure track faculty at a university. That's where I was. And so I was there. I moved across the country to go there. I got a PhD and $70,000 in student loan debt to achieve that career goal. And
wait, pause, because did you make that choice because that's what you authentically believed that you were supposed to be doing with your life? Like you were like, you know what, I'm a teacher, now I'm going to become this academic, and
yep,
like,
I believed that I wanted to take my skills as an educator.
Okay.
And I wanted to develop skills in mental health.
Okay.
So that's why I did counseling psychology. And I wanted to eventually train people or teach people who would also be going back into schools and into the community to bring wellness and healing in the mental health area.
Got it.
I also cared a lot about career counseling, which is the school psychology component, right? Okay. So that was why I became a professor. Like, I wanted to continue the teaching that I had done in that particular area, like in the particular area of psychology. And I also wanted to contribute to the field around college and career readiness, career counseling, and cross-cultural competency. Those were kind of some of my areas that were of interest for me as it relates to research. So definitely. I went into my professor that job as a full-time assistant tenure track faculty member or professor with some pretty strong beliefs that learning is important. What happens in the classroom needs to be engaging. That was one of the beliefs. Another belief that was important to me was that information, research, the production of knowledge is important, right? So I believe that. And then I also really believe that I needed to do meaningful, or wanted to do meaningful work. There was a reason why I spent this time professionally and
money.
So I get to this university, those are my beliefs, and I get to the university, and I just want to say right now, there are other people at that university who did not have this experience. There are other people at that university who would say that my experience did not match anything they've ever understood to be that university. So this is not about the university I was at. This is about my experience at that university. Experienced. Yeah, we could talk about how
I know, I can tell. I'm seeing some passion. I'm hearing a lot of passion in this. So I'm gonna speak on it.
Yeah, we could talk about people of color's experiences as different than white people in certain places as well.
Absolutely.
So if you want to bring it up later, you can do that. But I want to work through this real quick. So what I heard when I was at this university was someone said to me, it doesn't really matter what you do in the classroom as long as there's no complaints that make it to the dean's office. That didn't really work for me because I thought that what I did, I chose a university that was not a research-heavy university, right? That we were required to do research, of course. But teaching was also important to the mission of this university that I chose. So disconnect for me. Another thing that I heard was you must have a national reputation as a researcher. And that was not, if you remember the beliefs I said earlier, I believe that knowledge and research is important. I believe producing
Absolutely.
is important. I do not have a desire to have a national reputation. If it had been worded to me like this, knowledge and all this is important and you will have a bigger platform if you're national, that would be fine. But that's not the way that it was presented to me. It was very much about reputation and prestige, which are not motivating to me.
Got it. Which
Um,
would be inauthentic.
it would have been very, it felt wrong. It felt very much like I was putting on a jacket that did not fit even a little bit and would never fit no matter how.
Got it.
I washed it 100 times and it was the right size, right?
Got it.
And then the other thing that I experienced, which no one else probably knew I was experiencing and no one said to me, is I would sit in my office at the university. I was there for 3 years. And I think this started happening around year 2. I would sit in my office and I would feel like it doesn't really matter who's in my chair. There's nothing unique that I'm bringing to this that is actually doing something unique for this student group. I'm not saying that's true. I'm saying that was my lived experience.
Yeah.
I felt like my skills and my specialty, the things I really cared about, were being undervalued and underutilized. So there was a lot going on in my life at that time. So I don't want to say it's all the job, but most of it has to do with the job, is that these disconnects in my beliefs and the system caused me to burn out. I had, like depression. And eventually my only solution that I knew was to get away from there. And that's really how I feel. Like I had to get away from there.
So I want to go back to the statement about, sitting in that chair and feeling like you weren't valued. And my question is, like, when you don't feel valued for the gifts in which you've been given, like, how do you move beyond that? Like, what did you do? What did you do?
There I wasn't able to, but this is what I would say. I don't think I've ever been in a system where anyone was like, we love Kalinda Jones, she's amazing. Sometimes I get a little of that, and sometimes I get something very different than that, right?
Got it.
I don't necessarily need the system to tell me that I'm doing great. A lot of how I assess if I'm doing well is based on what happens in the classroom, because that's what is important to me, right?
Absolutely.
Is the interaction and the authentic relationships and learning that occurs in the classroom. That's what's really motivating to me. But this system was really against some of the values that I was. That's how I experienced the system. So I'm not trying to call out my dean who was there or fellow faculty. This is not about anyone but me.
Got it.
Not like the system was saying your values are wrong. Not do that.
Yeah.
Did I answer the question? Or
I feel like you said that, like there wasn't room, there wasn't space for you to like cope and like move beyond it. The only solution for you was to find other employment, go elsewhere. And so for those of our listeners who are like, yo, I'm in that same position where I'm feeling undervalued, I'm feeling like I can't express myself, I have to be inauthentic every day, like just some tips, like because you didn't just quit on the spot, like you stayed, you finished. Yeah. So like, what do you say to the people who are in your position and you just want to give them a little bit of like, you know what, this is what helped me and maybe this could potentially help you?
Well, I guess one thing I would say is, for one, I want to acknowledge the fact that the pieces that were going on had some gender sexism components, I think, in them, but they didn't have race components to them.
Got it.
They didn't have like sexual orientation components to them. So there wasn't like these layers. There weren't a lot of parts of my cultural identity that I thought intersected with the disconnect. Like I didn't think I was experiencing a lot of personal like aggressions or microaggressions, if you like that term. So I just want to say that first. Because sometimes that is a whole different ballgame than what I was navigating. For me, what I did was I pushed into the things that I thought was important. So it didn't matter to me if they didn't care what was going on in my classroom. I cared what was going on in my classroom. So I still spent that time developing assignments and developing authentic assessments, and putting the lens on the teaching that wasn't just a white Eurocentric lens, these things that I value. I was doing research. I wasn't writing up any of the results. That's a problem. You gotta publish to get tenure. But I was still pursuing knowledge the way that, I was still, which is what part of what you do as a researcher, right? So I was still pursuing knowledge. So I think that I was still doubling down into things that were still my values. I didn't give up my values, and my action didn't show different than my values.
Got it.
And I think that's important. So I will also say, you got to know your values. You have to have some level of self-awareness to be able to negotiate and navigate when the system's values and your values don't change. And I'll say one more quick thing. I see you have a question, but when I came to the community college district that I am, and I started teaching in our prison education program, it was very unclear who our allies were that were supportive of us teaching college courses in prison.
Got it.
So not everyone in our system valued what I valued, which was transformational learning on campus and in prisons. And we spent time finding allies and advocating so that people would change their values, right? So that sometimes you are in a position to do that. Like, you don't just have to check out when the system says no, but sometimes you're not in a position to do that. Sometimes you are and sometimes you aren't. So I know you had a question that came to mind. I thought that was important.
And more so just like a comment, or like what I'm getting from what you're saying is, when you feel like your back is against the wall, you can't be yourself, you still lean into your beliefs, right? So you find a way to push through based on the foundation that you have in your beliefs and what you believe for your students and for your families that you're serving. So that's what I heard from it. Because I think that could be helpful for our listeners who may be in a tight spot at this moment, or have been in the future, in the past, or maybe one in the future. So thank you for sharing that. I'm sorry I interrupted your flow, but I just had to know.
No, you had a question and I was just like, no, I got something else to say. So
no, I don't remember the question. That's what I remember. Like, I need that. That's something that I wish someone told me. Like, Michelle, just lean into your beliefs, lean into who you are when it gets really tough, because a lot of times as educators, especially if you're really truly trying to make an impact on the lives of the people you're with all the time, it gets tiring, and you need that type of advice. You need someone to tell you, like, just lean into your beliefs, lean into who you are, So I appreciate you sharing that.
Awesome. So I think we're going to end with kind of a takeaway and some enduring questions things that we're still wondering about. Do you have a takeaway? Was that your takeaway?
I feel like as an educator, your beliefs are so core to who you are as a teacher, right? They're like the foundation to everything that you do. If you believe in empathy, you're empathetic with your kids. If you believe in joy, you're smiling every day. Like, whatever you believe comes into that classroom, including the beliefs that aren't so good, right? And so when you're thinking about how to be authentic and how to honor yourself in your classroom and honor what you believe, and for me, it's like, Michelle, you got to lean into who you are and stand on that. And, that's my takeaway, is like, when it gets tough, and I got this from your conversation, you don't fall back, you don't check out, you lean in, and, you fight harder for what you believe, because that's the promise that you made when you became a teacher, when you became a counselor, when you became a principal. You made a promise, and you have to keep that promise. The promise doesn't expire because the conditions aren't favorable to you. And so that's my takeaway. If I have my wondering is, when it's time for you to show yourself, it could be a little scary, right? Because a lot of times when you're showing who you are to the world, it's like, I don't know, might get judged. People may or may not like it. So I'm wondering is like when you show up as self, you show up as your authentic self, and you get some unfavorable feedback, right? Like, how do you take that feedback without losing who you are? How do you, like, you know, you're yourself now. You're not fake anymore. You're real, but like you still get this feedback that may go against like this new person that you're trying to show. Like, how do you move with that? You know, how do you, like, but wait, I was just being me, like I thought I was supposed to be. But the feedback is not aligning with this version of you, this like bigger self that you're bringing into a space that expects a smaller version sometimes. So how do you, how do you move with that? I don't know.
And we're not going to answer the question. We're going to let you think about it, and everyone, because that's the point
Yeah.
of questions, right? Is like, what are you still thinking about after we talk? So one of the things that I'm taking away, I think, from this conversation, which is also like one of my questions. I think I have two questions, but one of the things that I'm taking away is like, it's so interesting to me that when you said the name Babalos for that creature, I remembered the name.
Okay.
And I think it's interesting to me that I'm just wondering, like, how am I making enduring assignments for students now? Like, that came authentically. I didn't read about that assignment anywhere. I created that assignment because a lot of the Punnett Square assignments are not real, because a lot of human traits aren't one gene traits, and Punnett Squares go back to like one genes, right? And two different alleles. And that's not how it really is. So I was like, well, you're not going to be
turning into a science teacher, y'all. So just let her talk.
But I was like, you're not going to turn into, I don't want you to think you're making people on Punnett Squares, because they're more complex. So we're not going to use eye color on Punnett Squares, right?
Got it.
I created that myself out of an authentic appreciation for real knowledge, real information, and a desire for people to learn. Like, that assignment was consistent with my beliefs. Right? And so I'm just wondering how I'm still creating assignments, and how I'll still be creating assignments that are like that when I'm not teaching in science. I'm teaching in social sciences now. And when I'm teaching with the limitations that I have, a lot of limitations now because of COVID-19, and we'll be talking about that in future podcasts. But I'm just wondering how I'm gonna do that. And the other thing that I'm thinking, the other question that I'm having is like, it's interesting, this contrast with like how I responded to the university and the lack of system support versus how I responded to the community college that I'm at with the lack of system support that I perceived around students who are incarcerated getting college education. Let me just say, now we have a lot of support in our community college district for that student population. But like, my approach was withdraw and burnout in one setting, and my approach was advocacy and in another setting. And so I'm just wondering, like, what the difference is that produced those different outcomes. That's right, about like, if my authentic self would not be recognized by the system, how I responded differently within those two systems around my authentic self. So that's, I'm kind of wondering about authenticity and advocacy versus authenticity and withdrawal.
That's deep.
So yeah.
You leaving us with a lot to ponder, friend. Yo, I'm here for it. I love the takeaways and wonderings, because it allows this conversation to not end when this recording ends, right? It allows you to continue to carry something with you, and that's how impact lasts. So to our listeners, thank you so much for listening today. Please feel free to leave a comment or suggestion about topics you would like us to discuss in the future, or if you have answers to the questions that we are wondering, we'd love to hear from you as well. So during our next episode, we will be continuing our Enduring Essentials series with authenticity in the midst of COVID-19. And also, if you haven't followed us on social media, you can find us at Educators for Impact on Instagram and Facebook. And you can also follow us on Twitter at EDU for Impact. EDU, the number 4, Impact. As always, we hope that you got something from this episode, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of your day, evening, night, whenever you're listening and tuning in. And we wish you well. Peace.